Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Go Ahead Tell Me. It is with great excitement to announce our next guest, writer, director, actor, and filmmaker Miguel Angel Caballero. Miguel, thank you so much for being here today. Please go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a filmmaker.
Sure. Um, so I was actually born in Mexico, and for the first 12 years of my life, I was raised 6 months in Mexico, 6 months in the US, and I
Mm.
actually went to school in both countries. My parents were farm workers, so they would come here, work for the season, then go back, and then stay out there 6 months. So I was just hopping around. Eventually, we settled in Oxnard, and I started having the acting bug at a very young age. I think even when I was like 5 years old, I would perform, and I always loved performance. Flash forward to when I was in high school, really started getting into it. Eventually transferred to UCLA, went to the School of Theater, Film, and TV. And I was acting pretty much most of my life until
Mm.
about 5 years, 5 years ago or so, that I decided to make a shift where I love acting and I love the process, but I felt the need to transition into writer director because I had a lot of stories to tell that weren't being told. And that's how I
Mm.
started writing and directing and kind of doing the films that I wanted to do. Specifically, I was looking to tell stories that are from US Latinx stories with an LGBTQ perspective. And that's,
Mm.
in short, kind of where I am now.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely got that feeling from your films too, of just this different perspective that's not very prevalent in our like media right now. So I really loved seeing that different perspective on those.
Right. And one thing that we do talk, I talk to my writing partner and producer often, Luis Aldana. We kind of touch upon how, oftentimes when you see a Latinx film, it's usually filmmakers that are from Latin America and the film comes here. And it's very rare to actually have a Latinx film that is from Latinx people in the US, because that's a very, very different, you know, it's a very different experience just growing up, being,
Hmm.
from Latin America or being from the US and you happen to be Latinx. So that's one of our focus to tell these stories of, which is basically our story, my story of growing up in the US and what's that like. And that's the work that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. We actually, it's part of our like our mission on this podcast. Started out as wanting to kind of unify different Latin communities. So that's why your film was, or your films are really like interesting to us, because that was our original like mission, and then we started kind of branching out into other communities. But our main goal is more like a unification of different cultures and different backgrounds.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had for you, which you already kind of touched upon, was as a kid, like was there representation you wish you would have seen, and that you were looking for and just couldn't quite find?
Oh, absolutely. I do remember because when I grew up here in the US, I grew up with my grandparents down in San Diego County in a very small
Okay,
town
that's where I'm
called,
at.
oh, that's amazing. Palma Valley. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's a small town at the foot of Palomar Mountain.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
in Vista, so a little familiar with that area.
Oh my God, amazing. So I grew up there and I'm Mexican. My parents are Mexican. And I remember, watching the TV that we had because, there wasn't cable available in this small ranch. And I remember just watching the people on sitcoms and on movies, and they didn't look like me. And this was when I was like 5 years old, 6, 7 years old. And I started developing like this shame for being
Mm.
Mexican, for being Latinx, because in my head I was thinking, this is how family should be. That is the culture we should have. What we do in our home, that's not right. Otherwise, it would be on TV. So, at a young age, it was almost like, this intense shame of being who I am, and I wanted to be like the characters on TV.
Mm.
It lasted a few years. I just remember it wasn't, like a big breakdown moment, but it just was in me. And when I moved to Oxnard, and I was, Oxnard is predominantly a Latino city. Um, then I started kind of like really tapping into myself, into my who I am, and how it was sort of like therapy that I had to give myself. Like, I'm not wrong, and our culture and who we are and the color of our skin is okay. And then from
Mm.
then, I just decided to pursue a career because I wanted to be in front of the camera, and I wanted to represent all those kids that were watching TV and say like, oh, look, he looks like me, because I had rarely did I have that experience growing up. And then, one thing led to another, that I just had this urge that these stories were not being told, so I transitioned. But yes, Carly, to answer your question, there was a little bit of like sort of no representation, it was sort of
Hmm.
non-existent. And also we didn't have cable, so what we got was just, whatever was there. And, it was very sort of in a way damaging, because it was, I did feel shame, but now the stories that I write, that I create, I include the Latinx culture and who we are and what we are, and I celebrate the good and the bad in it. Just to be out, to be on the big screen, and it's we're worthy to share our stories. We're worthy to be on the big screen, on the small screen, and to have our stories told from all perspectives and all shades of the Latinx community.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's devastating to think that kids feel that way, like that you felt such shame just because our media wasn't presenting different perspectives. And that's just it's great to see filmmakers like you who are now trying to make that difference. And I think with the ability to stream in all these different ways to get media now, I'm hope that kids aren't feeling that shame as much anymore.
I agree, and I hope so too. And it's just beautiful to see that there's a lot of Latinx filmmakers that are, coming out on the scene and putting out shows. We have a lot of TV now. We have a lot. I mean, we still have a long way to go, but
Hmm.
I'm just happy that at least youth right now can see themselves in certain characters that are not just, the muggers or
Hmm.
the vandals or the maids, you know what I mean? So that there's a whole rainbow of color and of who we are and what we do as Latinx community.
Yeah, there's like it's getting better. We're going in the right direction now.
Yes, I hope we continue.
Hopefully, yes, hopefully we'll
Yes.
continue on that. So kind of on that same line, is there any challenges that you've faced as a filmmaker and what that's been like for you?
It's interesting because a lot of times my writing partner and I are working on two feature films. One which is from the short that I did, and the other two are just films that take place here in the U.S. And
Mm,
it's, from a Latinx perspective. So it's interesting the perspective that people and producers have when we tell them, yeah, we're making a film. It takes place in Los Angeles. They're kind of looking at us and saying, "Oh, that's great. Is it in English or in Spanish?"
mm.
And we're like, why would it be in Spanish if we are like, you know what I mean? It just, and that's, I think, one of the challenges that we had to get used to. It wasn't a challenge that didn't allow us to move forward, but
Hmm.
we're like, this just doesn't exist. If you're Latinx and you're speaking English and you're telling them about a project, they just assume because you're Latinx, it should be in Spanish, like we're
Hmm.
often just kind of pushed from existing in the US. It's like, no, this is a story in the US. It takes place in the US with brown people, with Latinx people, and it's in English. How about that?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, that you would present an idea in totally in English and then them just be like, well, is it in Spanish? How, wow,
Yeah,
that is
it's
really
interesting. And
interesting.
then also it's like, yeah, it's about this guy who went to school here. He graduated from this college. Is it in Spanish? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But that's one of the challenges. The other, I would have to say, which is, I know, a challenge for all other filmmakers and, a bunch of talented filmmakers that I know, is just getting the money. I feel
Mm,
that, there's a lot of sort of inclusion happening within studios. There's a lot of like programs and outreach, but I just don't know how much money they put into actually making films. That's one of
mhm.
the hardest things that we have, is that if you are not in the studio system and if you are not being pushed by a major studio, financing it becomes very difficult. And it's much needed to move forward with many, many projects. But I feel that on the other side of the coin, it also allows us to be much more creative with what we do in terms of like, how are we going to finance outside of the system? How are we going to make this movie? So it keeps us on our toes to kind of figure out how to keep pushing the films forward and figure out creative ways for financing and creative ways to tell the story a little bit cheaper. So that's, you know, that's the plus of it. But I would have to say the biggest challenge is financing and, you know, just really having these studios just put put the money up instead of just having so many talks about diversity, just fund films.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up. It's actually something I've thought about a lot because I went to school for film, and that was my like goal was to be a filmmaker. And I have since kind of branched off in a different direction, but that was always my main thing in school is like how are we supposed to finance these projects? And we never really learned that. And where I was going to school, like there wasn't a this is how you get your funding for your projects. And like when I graduated, I was like, I have no idea how I'm supposed to do this. Like I can't fund a film. So it's interesting
Right.
that you bring that up because it's not a challenge I feel like is talked about enough with small filmmaker like independent filmmakers.
Right, right. Yeah, it is. And you know what, Carly, I do have to say that this past year, which we were touring the short film Acuitzeramo, it was beautiful. I was part of a few markets because we were of a few festivals. And it was beautiful to finally see Latinx people of color in positions, high positions, to be able to greenlight. And it was one of the first times that I've had these meetings. They were all on Zoom, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
of, the 2020.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of people from these major companies who were now the vice president of development or like the lead of development, that I think that's how we're going to change this, because if we put people of color, Latinx folks, in charge of greenlighting, it becomes much more easier because
Mm-hmm.
they have similar experiences. Not that we're all the same, but they could understand a Latinx story much better than, a 65-year-old cis white male who you're trying to tell, and they're like, this won't work. We need to add this and that. And I think it's super important to have, you know, people of color, the Latinx community in positions where they could actually bring things forward and greenlight things. And I think for this year, for the first time when I was part of all these meetings, it felt really good. I was meeting, I met a handful of Latinx folks that were just in positions, very high positions in these companies, and it really made me excited. And I felt like, wow, now we're finally seeing a bit of a change because it's with them that we're going to be able to have a lot of projects.
That's awesome to hear. It's again, that was something I was just having a conversation about a couple weeks ago about how all these people of power have been white men. And so we're not seeing these different perspectives because they're not greenlighting the projects by people who are not like that they can't relate to.
Exactly. And that's so important because, I mean, I think these companies know that they need to diversify their staff and the people that are in positions of greenlighting. And, it hasn't happened for decades, for
Yeah.
many, many years. But I feel like now at least there's some kind of change. And it was really exciting to see a handful. Again, not that, we made it and it's great, it's going to be fine. No, we still have to keep pushing. But
Hmm.
I saw a glimpse of that change instead of constantly talking to executives who, like you said, are just like white males that are older in their 70s. And it's like, oh my God, you're not understanding what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have no idea what this
Yeah.
is. You don't even get it. Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
oh, well,
And then the suggestions of stereotypes come. Why
mm,
don't we make them this? Or like, what if you didn't speak English? It's like, oh my God, no. What if you didn't wasn't educated? It's like, no,
yeah.
that's not the story.
And that's not the world we live in. That's not what society is like.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, it's good to hear that that change is happening, that you're seeing that and it's reflecting in your work in the festivals and things like that. That's a really positive thing to hear.
Yes, I'm really, really excited. And, and we'll see where we go once we reopen. And I'm very positive about it.
Yeah, and just I was listening to another interview with you about the film or the festivals over this past year, and you brought up a really good point about how these festivals have actually been. It's been kind of a cool experience with the festivals during COVID, and how it's more accessible to people now with because they're not having to travel to see it; they can see them online. And I never thought about that, but that's such a good point. Like we now can watch these small films from home or these independent filmmakers from home, and we don't have to worry about traveling to these festivals where it's so expensive to get there, and then you're not able to like immerse yourself in that experience.
That's absolutely true. I think, if unless you live in the city where the festival is taking place, film festivals are very, in a way, without trying to be, but it's a very elite hobby or elite thing to do because you have to pay your way to get there. You have to pay lodging, you have to pay your tickets. So, you spend a lot of money. So now that it was online, it was so beautiful because, my dad would never get on a plane and go to a festival to see a film, but now he was able to just kind of see a lot of films that were happening from the comfort of his home. And it was really, really nice to be available for the masses instead of just for a selected few that could afford a ticket to go to this festival. And it was just really nice to kind of be accessible for the masses that would want to see the films. And also in the same way, initially, COVID hit when our film had just started the festival run. So we
Mm.
did one festival in the US and then everything went inside. We all went inside. And, initially I was a little bummed, but then I thought, you know what, let's just write it. You have to adapt to life. You can't expect life to adapt to you. So let's just see where this goes and what happens. And it turns out that especially for the meetings at these, wonderful festivals we're having with where they pair filmmakers with executives or people, they turned out to be amazing because what I've been told is one, they usually can't get a lot of major executives to attend a festival because they have traffic, they have to travel, and they have to be there at 5, and it just becomes really hard on their daily routine.
Mm.
But for them to just log on for 30 minutes, it's totally possible. And two, apparently at these markets, there's a lot of people where have 20 minutes to talk to an executive. People are walking in, it's noisy, they're waving at somebody recognizes them. So the focus and the attention is not there on you because there's so much stimulation around them. And it was wonderful because on Zoom, it was just them and I, and we had like a 20-minute uninterrupted conversation. So it was actually turned out to be really, really good having this experience during COVID.
That's awesome. Another like positive thing that can come out of such a horrible year.
Right, right.
um, and I did want to talk a little bit about like the film you were just discussing, your most recent one that was in the festivals last year. And I'm sorry, can you pronounce it for me?
Yes, it's called Acuitzeramo.
Acuitzeramo? Oh,
Yes.
perfect.
Eh,
Would you mind going in a little bit about that and your inspiration behind that film?
Yes, so Acuitzeramo is actually the name of the small town that I spent part of my time growing up, and it's in the state of Michoacan in central Mexico. And the inspiration of that came because growing up in that town, I would see, it was very common to see older men or older women that never married, and they just lived alone, and the whole town knew them, and that was who they are. They were the single person from the town. And I remember asking my mom and asking around, why didn't they marry? What happened? Like, why are they living alone? And they would say like, yeah, they just never found anybody. And that was the story that the town had.
Mm,
And as I started getting older, growing up, and reflecting myself and accepting myself as a queer man, I started thinking back when I grew up, and I started thinking, was it really that they never found the person they wanted, that they never found anyone? Or is it that they just couldn't openly love the person they
mm,
loved in this town? Because, small towns, especially in rural Mexico, are Catholic heavy.
mhm,
There's like a blanket of homophobia, and elders are not really talked about in terms of the LGBTQ community. They're sort of pushed aside. So that's where the inspiration came from in terms of trying to reflect back on these older men and women that didn't really have a voice in terms of like who they were or were able to express themselves. So then the story started developing from there, and I, wanted to be the story of an elder who actually lived with a partner, and then his partner, in secret from the town, and then his partner passes away, and then what happens then? Also, the partner had a son who lives in Chicago who had to fly in for the funeral, and that's the first time he learns that his father was gay.
Mm.
So the story started coming together, layer by layer, but the inspiration of it was me growing up there and seeing that, gay elders was not a thing. There was no way to even just there was no conversation about it. You
Mhm.
just didn't talk about it. They were just older and they never married. And it's funny because once the film came out, I've had so many emails, and I keep saying this because it just gives me chills even now, of people that are saying, "Look, my parents are from that town. I'm gay. I never knew how to come out to
Mhm.
them because they are, first generation. Where can I see the film? Because I want to sit them down and then come out to them
Oh, I
afterwards."
just got chills from
Um,
that as well.
Yes, and then I've had an email from somebody that said, "Look, we all know my godfather's gay. He's from a small town. We want to tell him it's okay. Can we use your film, play it
Mm.
for him, and then have a conversation so he knows that, it is okay to do this?" And it just, the list goes on and on in terms of like how, this topic is not really talked about, and there's no sort of bridge to having a conversation of gay elders, especially like in rural towns. And although the film is Acuitzeramo and it takes place in Acuitzeramo, I think it's a universal message
Mhm.
because even here in the US, we have people in cities that live with families that is just a taboo, and you don't talk about it. You don't talk about this subject, especially if you get old past a certain
Mhm.
age. So it's really heartbreaking, and that was the main focus of the film, to bring light to these elders and remind us that they, at this moment in their life, they need love and acceptance, and we often just push them aside
Mm.
and forget about elders in general,
Mhm.
much more LGBTQ elders.
Wow, that's like you said, heartbreaking, but it's beautiful that you were able to that you got that in a film and like were able to get that reaction from it. I can't imagine how that must feel for you to be getting those emails and seeing the impact that your film can have.
Oh, I cry, Carly. I cry.
Oh,
I think the last email that I got recently was this woman that emailed me and said, "Hey, I got your information. There's a famous singer in Spanish. He passed away, Juan Gabriel,
mm,
and he has a lot of like, amazing, international hits. And one of his songs is I Wasn't Born to Love."
mm,
So then she said that she was, cleaning her house, and she put the song up without thinking anything. I Wasn't Born to Love. Yo no nací para amar is the title of the song. And in midway through, she said she started just breaking down
mm,
because she realized that her godfather was gay and he had passed away and he wasn't able to love anybody.
mm,
And she had seen the film like a week prior, and she just made that connection in her house. And she said, "I've been crying for hours,
mm.
like realizing that my godfather, this song would kind of fit him because in his eyes, I wasn't born to love because he was gay and he knew that nobody would accept him."
Oof.
So it was just really heartbreaking also to hear.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I'm like my whole body has chills from that. That's incredible and just devastating.
Yeah, yeah, it
How
is.
has the response been from your hometown to the film?
They are very, very excited. They still, when I've gone there twice after the film, and they congratulate me. And I think my town is not as homophobic as the fictional Acuitzeramo in the
Mm,
film. I think my town is now, in 2021, they're much more open. There's been, a couple folks from the town that are openly gay, so it's changing a bit. The thing for the film is that I set it the way that I remember it when I was a child. And
hmm
there's a lot of towns that are still like that, very, very homophobic heavy. But my town, Acuitzeramo, has really embraced it. and I get congratulations left and right. I think more than anything, I'll be honest, I think they're just excited to see their town on the big screen, and they're excited to see that their town is representing them. So, but yeah, they've all been very gracious and loving and supportive. So nothing major from my
Good.
town in terms of, yeah. So I'm very
Yeah,
happy
that's
about that.
awesome. They must be so proud to be able to say that you're from there and that that film was made there and it's making such an impact as well.
Yeah, and they love seeing, because my dad is in the film, and he's an extra in the film in the very beginning of the film. And when we grew up in Mexico, my dad had he used to actually go when he was in his 20s with a donkey and a projector from town to town projecting cinema to the towns around. It's
Wow.
so crazy. It's like a fairy
Yeah.
tale. And then he opened up a theater in our town, in the back of his house, which was a makeshift theater. He built a wall, like there was room for people to sit. And then from there, he started projecting films and he started charging. And that's where I grew up. The time of the year when I would go there, the movie theater or the screen was literally outside my window, and I could see out there and watch my father with these movies and like a whole audience. So then you flash forward, and I'm there filming, and I asked him to do a cameo, and I had to convince him because he was like, "I'm not gonna be in front of the camera. That's not for me. No, no, no." I'm like, "Dad, please, please." So then he finally agreed, and he was right in front of his house, and we were getting ready to roll, and the crew was setting up, and then it really hit me. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is a man whose love for cinema inspired my love for cinema. We've gone out. Now I come back and I'm doing a movie in front of his movie theater where he's in front of the camera and his son is directing."
Oh
I was
my
like, it
goodness.
was like blowing my
Oh, I got
mind.
chills again. That is amazing. He must be so proud too to think that like his love for film rubbed off on you in such a great way.
Oh, he loves it. He loves it. He doesn't, my father's 84. I'm the youngest of
Mm.
five. And the funny thing is that he loves the film. He's seen it like, many, 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 many times. But he doesn't understand how a short film could get this much attention, because, we've been very fortunate, and I think we've won over 15 awards during our
Wow.
festival run in 2020. And then I tell him, "Dad, look at this trophy. It just got here in the mail. We won another award." So he stares at it on FaceTime and he's like, "Wait, for that little thing again?" And I'm like, "Dad, yes." He's like, "Why is there so much commotion for that little thing? It's not even an hour." And I'm like, "That's how it works, Dad. Like, así es. Después hacemos la que viene." I'm like, "We'll make the feature later," but he's just confused why it's winning so many awards. He's like, "Well, you should have at least made it long. Like, what are they gonna say? This guy has a short film and it's winning awards. What is?" He has no idea how the industry
Oh,
works.
that's great. And you are making it a feature, right? Is that right?
Yes, yes. We're currently finishing up the draft, the screenplay, and we hope, if all goes well, that perhaps by the end of the year we can go into production. This time the feature is from the point of view of Anthony, which lives in Los Angeles, and he gets a call that his father is ill, and he goes to a small rural town to see his father, and it takes place in Michoacan, and it talks about the elder LGBTQ marginalized community that exists in these places. So it's not just about one man this time. It's about a whole community of gay elders that have had to live in the margins in order to survive and to be where they're at.
Wow, that's gonna be really cool to see it change from that short film into a feature. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're really excited. We're super, super
Is
excited.
the Men in Broken Sunflower Hearts, or is it like a connection between the two films?
Yes, so Broken Sunflower Hearts was the first film that I wrote and directed, and it stars Anthony, which is sort of loosely based on
Mm,
on me, the character of Anthony. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a triptych, to do three films based on this character in different areas of his
mm.
life. So Broken Sunflower Hearts was the first one. The second one was Acuitzeramo, and the plan was to do a third one in 2020, but yes, some little thing happened.
Something changed that.
Something changed that, but But at least we got the second one, and I think we can get to the third one in the future. But yes, they are definitely connected. This is all part of Anthony's, the main character's, ether and his life, and I wanted to do different things in his life of you know of what he's done, and different areas of his
Got it.
life.
Yeah, I watched Broken Sunflower Hearts and I just was amazed at how much like feeling was in a 15-minute short. Like it was so good. The beginning of him on the dates was cracking me up. It was so good. So I'm excited to see that his story is
Yeah.
continuing because when it was over I was like I need more. I need more of him and Sam.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, Broken Sunflower Hearts, we really shot that on a shoestring budget. It was like really, like I really mean nothing. It was just a bunch of favors, and but it had a lot
Hmm.
of heart, and I wanted to, at that time I had gone through a breakup, and I was just kind of like, trying to kind of put my feelings out on paper as an outlet, and it turned out to be like a great film. It has a lot of me in it, but of course it's a fictionalized character. But yeah, I really do have a soft spot. And then the little girl that plays
Hmm.
Luna Camarena, she's so cute, and she was like, we hit the jackpot with her.
I was
She's
gonna say the same
adorable.
thing. She was so good in there. She was just so cute and like her little lines were so good when I loved it. She just stole my heart right off the bat.
She's beautiful, yeah. And the whole cast, Matias Ponce and Luis Aldana, there, it just was one of those projects that you just have a lot of love and you go into it, and then just magically stuff starts happening and doors start opening, and it just works out. There was no resistance, there was no like negative energy from anybody. It was just a very beautiful team that came together. I think it was like nine of
Oh
us
wow.
total in the entire team to shoot the
Very
film.
small, but it's beautiful. The result is amazing. So I'm so excited that there's gonna be more of them.
Yes, 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 me too. I can't wait.
And then I know we're getting close to being done here, but I had to ask because I saw on Instagram, you're doing a documentary about your father. Is that right?
Yeah, so Luis Aldana, my writing partner and producing partner, we embarked on this documentary, um, about my dad, because I feel like my dad, he's 84, he's lived a whole life, like I mentioned. I think, he had this theater, and he used to carry projectors and a donkey, and when he was here in the US, he worked the fields. He literally picked strawberries, he picked like every vegetable you could imagine with my mother. So they had a very interesting life, to say the least. But at the same time, it's very common for a lot of immigrants that come here, work, then go back. And I told Luis, I really want to tell a story from that perspective, because there's stories that are being told about undocumented immigrants that come to the U.S. and that are beautiful and should be told. And I think we need to continue to tell those stories to raise awareness. Um, but I told him, like, in my instance, it's different because my father was not undocumented, and he kept going back and forth. And he loved Mexico, but then all his children started having a life here. So at this point, at 84, he's really torn, because we are all here. We live in California, in Oxnard and LA. But he loves Mexico. So oftentimes he just goes to Mexico for 2 weeks and then comes back. So his heart is here, his family, but like his passion and everything and his freedom is in Mexico. So we're documenting this elder who has retired and goes back and forth from the US to Mexico, just enjoying life, and sort of just, I was just really interested to what he did when he went out there, because he's always busy. I'm like, what are you busy doing? Can I follow you with a camera? I
Oh
want to
man,
know.
that's gonna be such a
You
fun
know,
story to tell.
yeah, and he is funny and moody. I
So it'll be
love him.
great on camera.
Yeah, my producing partner was interviewing him, and we were asking him some serious questions about my mother passing, and I'm like, you just ask him, and I think he'll tell you. He won't tell me, because I feel like he's blocked it off. And he asked him, like, so tell us about your late wife and how what she was like. And he looks at me, and I used to be like really really obese when I was a child, and he looks at me and he's like, Did you know that Mike used to look like a meatball? That was his answer. I'm like, Dad, I'm like, okay.
Oh my goodness.
So we're going along for the ride. We don't know where it's going, but we're super thrilled and we know that we're gonna have
Yeah,
something
it sure
really
sounds like it.
special.
It sounds like you've got a good character for the main screen. I
Right.
love that. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. It's been a blast listening to you and learning about your father. I'm really excited for that documentary now.
Thank you so much, Carly. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love what you guys are doing. I think it's beautiful,
Oh,
and
thank
I'm
you
a
so much.
fan.
And
Thank you.
before you go, can you let us know where we can find your next films or where we can keep up to date on your newest projects?
Sure. I have an Instagram, and it's at MIG Angel, ANGEL 1111. And also for the latest film, it's actually the link is on my Instagram for the latest film as well. And I usually post mostly about the work that I'm doing on there.
Okay,
So I think it's there. And also there's a website that is
perfect.
miguelangelcaballero.com.
Well, I hope everyone goes and checks out your films, and we're looking forward to your next releases. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Please be sure to keep up with Go Ahead Tell Me by following us on Instagram or visiting our website to sign up for our weekly newsletter. Thanks again. Talk soon.